Yeah. There's a sign in. I think we're ready to get going. Again, thank you everyone for taking time out of your busy day to come to our committee meeting. We have a few guests tonight come to observe the process of the committee. And I guess for full disclosure, we're being videotaped. So I don't think we're being streamed live, are we, Jeff? No, but so anyways. Again, for those that weren't here last time, I'm David Zeitlin with Hill International. And I put an agenda up here for tonight. I'm going to go over an overview and a couple of clarifications from last week. And then we're going to go, Linda Waters is here, and she's going to go over some norms with us as a group. And then NAC Architecture, Tom and Keith are going to go over schedule, process, ed specs, and design, and the evolution of designs from what we talked about 2 weeks ago. So there is a sign-in sheet going around, so make sure that you sign in, please. I want to talk about one thing that came up last time, and I've heard a little bit about since, and that is the concept of modernization. And I want to define this right up front. Modernization is a term used by the state of Washington. And it's specifically used by the Office of the Superintendent of Public Instruction for the grants that they give to school districts. And within that grant program, you can either modernize an existing school rather than tear it down, or you can do what they call a new and live. So you build a new building, and then when you're done building it, you tear down the old one. That's where the word modernization comes from. It doesn't necessarily mean what a building's going to look like. It's not going to be a modernist building or something like that in the end. So I just want to clarify that in case anybody was wondering. I think we got a few comments after the last meeting in that regard. And then in terms of some drivers, I want to talk about a few drivers here. The three, from 30,000 feet, the three big drivers on this project to keep in mind, first of all, is the budget. We have a finite amount of budget, and that budget comes from primarily two sources. It comes from the voters of Ellensburg, first and foremost, and it comes from the state of Washington. So it also comes from the voters of Ellensburg and all the other voters from around the state, from the legislature. So those are the two pots of money, and there's only so much of that that we have for this project to spend. The second driver is it has to be educational driven. This is an educational institution, first and foremost. It's for our children and our children's children, and is a legacy that we leave behind. So it's very important that the decisions we make, we get right as far as being educationally driven. And the third, and you would think this would be a no-brainer, but in all of my years in working in public education, it's amazing how many times the conversation is not about this, and that is, it's all about the students. It's not about anybody else in this room, it's about the students. It has to be about the students, first and foremost. That's why we're doing it. That's why the state of Washington is giving money to the Ellensburg School District to build and add on to this building and to renovate this building. It's for their education. And we all know that this building it's a wonderful building that is in desperate need of lots of TLC. So as we go through that, I think that helps as far as the conversation when we keep those three drivers in mind. There's a couple of discussion points that we want to have tonight. One has to do with the facade of the 1929 building and any of the other older pieces of the project as well. It is and always has been the intent to expose and make, again, a wonderful, beautiful facade that's facing on Ruby, the main entrance. That has been, I know it's important to our design team, I know it's important to the community, and I know it's important to the administration and the school. So I don't even think that's a question. You know, it's a beautiful facade. It's got a beautiful entry piece, and we want to showcase that. The other piece, and I understand this may be a little bit controversial, is our beautiful auditorium. And I use the word auditorium specifically. It is an auditorium. It was built as an auditorium back in the 20s and 30s. It wasn't built as a theater. So theaters come with, you know, 3/4 full flies, and they have all kinds of other bells and whistles that come with it. This is an auditorium for educational use that can be used for other purposes as well. You know, it can be used by the community. It could be used for some theater use, and that would be wonderful. As you'll hear in a little bit, adding onto it would, this goes back to the budget, to put on wings and green rooms, and we have some solutions to some of these. And scene shops would add, you know, we don't know exactly, but $1.5 to $2 million out of the budget just to do that. And a little later on, you're going to hear Keith and Tom talk about what we are going to do to enhance the theater. And there are a number of things we are going to do to enhance the theater. And I think it's going to be quite wonderful when we're done. We have to allocate our dollars all in the right places. And in conversations with Paul and with Michelle and with Farley and others, classrooms first and foremost in the building. So with all of that said, I'm going to turn this over to Linda. I'm going to be the scribe. And go.
Whoops. Hi. Some of you know me. My name is Linda Waters, and I've been asked to come in for a meeting or two to help kind of grease the wheels of communication and also help clarify the difference between this committee and the Team for a Common Vision, with which I was involved in the facilitation. So although there are several members, hi Tori, of the Team for a Common Vision that are here, and also for the Strategic Planning Committee before that, you know, several members here. So this is different than that. For one thing, and this is really important if you were involved with the TCV, this is not a consensus process. I will not make you use cards, no colored cards, and this is an advisory committee. That is, you all are coming up with, I'm just getting up to speed of this, by the way, too, so you're coming up with guidance to, and working with the architects and Hill International as well, to, you know, to provide guidance for this, you know, stakeholders in one way or another. So I'm also, so let's see what you know, here. So I would like to invite you to create some norms of how the meetings are going to be run. That is mainly norms of behavior. You know, how are you going to interact with each other? There are strong opinions held, I'm guessing, by all of you, although many of you I don't know. And how are you going to work those things out here? How are you going to discuss them? How are you going to communicate also with the architect and construction team? So I could tell you a list of things, and I think you should do these. I don't think that's really as helpful as if you create the norms. So I'd like to take just a few minutes here and ask you, what kind of norms would you like people to use in interacting in this group? For example, you know, testing your assumptions might be a norm. Anybody have anything they want to throw out there?
Straw poll, is that the same thing as testing assumptions?
A straw poll could be a strategy for testing your assumptions. That would be, so testing your assumptions would be, you might look at me and assume that I believe a certain thing about how this middle school should be designed. Well, that's your assumption. testing the assumption would be to ask me, is this how you feel? I mean, it sounds really fancy. It's really just checking out your assumptions. Because we get into trouble when we treat our assumptions as fact. That's just, I mean, it's not just in here, we do it all over the place. You know, it's job security for me. I'm a mediator, conflict management specialist, that's just, you know, that's what it is. So, so testing your assumptions or inferences, is that something you would like to add to the list? Okay. Yeah, okay, great, what else?
Something about respect.
Okay, respect. Something about respect. Tell me what respect means. What would be respectful behavior to you?
Listening without interrupting.
Okay.
Testing your assumptions.
Yeah, all these norms could go under respect, couldn't they? So listening without interrupting, and okay, and Tor?
I don't know, maybe this is too specific to what you're talking about, but a specific structure for deciding who's speaking at what moment in time. Does that make sense? No cards, no cards, I'm just saying.
I didn't even bring them. For those of you that weren't involved with the TCB process or didn't know about it, there were 5 colored cards and they had very just specific meanings, and you didn't get to talk, you didn't use your card. Some people hated it. Okay, what else? Anything else around respect, for example? Yes?
Begin with an attitude of trust.
Begin with an attitude of trust. And if there are any of these, by the way, that you don't want to add, let me know. Dorothy, anything you think of? I'll put you on the spot. If I know your name, I would put you on the spot.
It's looking pretty good. I agree with what's up there so far.
Okay.
Number 1 might be a little hard. We'll work on it.
Okay, I'll help.
I wonder if there should be something about that the norms extend beyond this 2-hour time period, so that as we're having interactions and talking, not just to each other, but to the rest of the community, that we're doing those same things. Maybe not structure who's talking, but.
Yeah, right. It might not.
Yeah.
Well, that's great, because I was going to suggest that afterwards, so now I don't have to. What else? Don?
He opened ideas brought by everybody.
I don't know if this counts as a norm, but it goes back to what you said at the very beginning. We need to remember the bottom line,
Okay.
that this is all about the students.
Okay. So remember in the bottom line why we're here.
Yeah, remember why this whole thing is going on.
Okay. So I'm guessing that all of you have some opinions, however strongly held. So one of the reasons you're here is because you have those opinions. So it's important to do advocacy for your opinion, and also then perhaps inquiry or asking questions about, you know, is that, do I still hold that opinion? So maybe flexibility. Is that something that might work?
Flexibility.
Flexibility.
Something I'm not.
Anything else? Okay, I'm going to suggest a couple things, just because this is what I do. And if you don't like it, then let me know. That's absolutely fine. One is that to agree on what important words mean. So agree on the meaning of important words. Things like David clarified modernization. What's that about and why is it used? So if there's a word that comes up and there seems to be a lot of energy around it or it seems to be core, I would suggest that you make sure that you understand what that means and that there's a clear understanding amongst the whole group. So that would be agree on the definition of important words. Oh, another thing that I would recommend is that you share your reasoning. Like, how did you come to this strongly held opinion? You know, why? What went into it? You know, or did you just wake up and say, I'm going to decide to do this because I'm going to pick on Meg today? You know, I just want to pick on Meg today. I mean, how many people really do that? They wake up and go, oh, I'm going to make Meg's life miserable today, or I'm going to just, you know, Jeff is going to go, he's going to hate me by this. You know, that's, so explaining your reasoning, and if that's part of your reasoning, well, it's important for everybody to know that. So explaining your reasoning for why you are asking a question or suggesting something. And then the last, one more thing. Listen attentively. Is that something you're willing to do? Listening to your colleagues? So that's part of the respect thing. I guess, yeah, part of that. And then I want to go through something that those of you on the TCV will be somewhat familiar with, which is distinguishing between the needs or the values that you have. So a value might be a good, you know, 21st century learning environment. That might be a desire or a value. And then a position. So there's the value over here. And then there's the position, which is your opinion about how best to meet that need. So, you know, in the TCV, you're aware there was a lot of discussion about how much new, how much modernization, all that. So an example of that in this situation might be you might have the needs or the values of energy and space efficiency. That's your value, right? And you might have as your position that because of that, there can be no spaces that are 2 stories high. That's the position. So the value, hold on to. The position, I would encourage you to be flexible about. I'm seeing some of this, so can that go on there? Sure.
I just want to say, and I think this goes with the respect item, and I hope, personally, I hope this very much, is that people understand that having a completely opposing opinion does not demonstrate, certainly on my part, a lack of respect. And I think that's what I have real concern for, is that I know people in this room that I've worked very closely with and have tremendous amount of respect for. And the fact that I might have an opposite opinion does not diminish that respect at all. So that's very important. Maybe it just goes under number 2. I don't know.
Okay.
So what's number 12?
So number 12 would be, it's not personal, or a differing opinion does not mean disrespect?
Yeah, does not equal.
Does not equal disrespect.
Get some math symbology.
Okay.
Does not equal.
We can still be friends.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah,
I didn't say that.
It got really quiet. And so also then that kind of brings up something that's related, which is if you have a strongly held opinion and somebody else has another differing strongly held opinion, I would encourage you to not take it to the personal. That somehow that person who differs from you in opinion did not all of a sudden throw horns in the tail. It just, you know, it just makes it better. I mean, it's a small community, right? We do need to, you know, walk out of here. We'll see each other at Super One. So not making it personal. Anything else anybody would like to add? Yes, Mike.
I would just say that, you know, recognize that, you know, within this group of people, we have some experts in their given fields. And you don't necessarily always have to defer to them, but recognize that You know, I'm the technology guy. That is my bread and butter. I don't know how to manage a classroom. I don't know how to best create curriculum, things or manage kids in those environments, but I know the technology pieces. So make sure you understand that there are people here. I mean, we've got Dale from facilities, we've got food services here, we've got people from all different specialties. Be sure to use those people when those kind of subjects come up.
Okay. Thanks, Mike. Anybody else? Going, gone? Okay. So, does everybody here agree? Oh, so there's a little bit of consensus right now. Does everybody here agree to follow these norms within this meeting? Make sure nobody's asleep yet. That's good. Yeah, Tom. I don't know. Yeah. Come on, color. Yeah, right. That was the green last time. Okay, great. Is there anybody who has concerns about any of these? Now's your time. Okay, cool. And I would also, underscore what Michelle said, that the more that, you're kind of emissaries for various, for your circles in the community. So, you might encourage these with other people as well. And for the observers back there, there are some guidelines about how you would share with the committee during the time for the observer. There will be time for observer comments. There are also comment cards on the chairs so that, yeah. And so if you've got one, just bring it up to me after I'm done talking and I'll make sure and read it. And if it follows the purpose of this. And there are guidelines for that. Do we have a time for when the comments are going to come from the observers?
Not a specific time, but we could set a time.
Okay.
So maybe at the end of halfway through design or something? Want to do that? Or at the end of, we have head spent. At the end of the schedule and the process before we get to design. I'll take some questions.
Okay. Okay.
So and then some
So
more at the end after
if
design.
anybody wants to get up and talk, then there will be a time for that. Otherwise, we can read the cards if you write something down. I think that's it. Thanks you all, and this is going to be fun. For me anyway, just watch it. Yeah, Jeff?
Just one question about the schedule for this evening.
Mm-hmm.
The band awards night is at the high school. It starts at 6:30. I kind of like to be there. So is the plan to go up to 6:30 or somewhere in that vicinity, or what? I mean, we got a message about moving it from 6, ending at 6 to ending at 6:30. Is that the intent?
Well, I just put that out there so that, because I knew Linda would be coming tonight, so in case we needed more time. So I don't, certainly scooch out if we're not.
I still want to miss any votes.
So if there's a vote, we'll have to hold it till next time.
Great. Okay, so right before I turn this over to Tom and Keith, I just want to remind everybody, I need my glasses for this, and it's in the meeting minutes that hopefully everybody got, are our givens for this project, which are different than some of our goals. This is, we are retaining part of an existing building. It's a very tight site. There's limited parking. It's in a residential neighborhood. Capitol Street is a busy thoroughfare. We have a defined amount of square footage, about 120,000 square feet, no more, that we can build here based on our budget, which is the other constraint. There are a certain number of teaching and accessory spaces, and out of last week, since 2 weeks ago, we've actually added 2 more classrooms to the project, and of course the original 1929 entrance. So those are our givens that we came up with last time. I just want to remind everybody. So, over to you guys.
Other than that, it's really easy. So I'm just going to start out with a little bit of a recap for those who were here 2 weeks ago, and it's a recap for those who weren't. It might be new information, but what phase we're in right now is called schematic design. So that's really the big picture look at at the design of a building. And so what we're interested in is making sure that we have accommodated all the spaces that are needed in the building, and that those spaces are in the right location relative to each other. So what you're going to see are sort of single line sketch type drawings. You're not going to see doors or windows or anything like that, because we don't want to get focused in on details at this point. We want to make sure we have the spaces accounted for and they're in the right space. So that's kind of what this committee's charge is, and that's the level where we need input from various stakeholders. There's a lot of factors out there. There's obviously the educational piece of it. There's site-driven issues, transportation. There's the neighborhood to think about, and there's outside uses of the building. So a lot of different input is really valuable at this level. So in terms of the schedule, we want to make progress with this committee up through essentially the end of June. So we've scheduled these meetings every 2 weeks, and so far we've made progress from the last one. So we're expecting to hopefully make as much or more progress at each meeting. And so when we wrap this up, essentially that will be the work of this committee. I mean, it's not that everything's done and there's no ability to change anything, but the big questions will be answered. And at that point, we head into the phase called design development. So that's where we actually meet with users of the building, and we talk very specifically about what you need in your space. How much cabinetry, where do the outlets go, how many data jacks, what's the lighting like. We get down into very, very detailed information. So that's really works in small groups for the users of those spaces. And but we already know where the spaces are because we've had that question was answered with this committee. So at that point, then that's about a 3-month process. It'll lead into the fall, and then when we get all that information, we've pretty well answered the design questions. And then we make sure that we turn this design into construction documents that the contractor can then actually build the building with. So that's kind of a 5-minute diatribe on an entire building design process. So,
Tom, can we take one moment? We forgot to do something.
Okay.
And I'm going to turn this over to Michelle. There's a couple of people we need to introduce.
Well, there's quite a few people actually who either were on the committee and couldn't make the last meeting or are new today. So maybe for the benefit of everybody, we'll just do a quick go around, just your name and why you're
My
there.
name is Jim Pappas.
There you go. Perfect.
Mike Bussey, Morgan Teacher Humanities.
Laura Leach, Morgan Teacher, Math and ASB Activities.
Michelle Village, Principal.
Heather Stuman, Morgan Teacher, Science and Quest.
Kara Mars, Community Member Parent.
Patrick Armstrong, Food Service Director.
Jeff Cochran, Ed Tech and Community Outreach. Kevin Churchick, Dean of Students here at Morgan.
Ed Silva, Custodian. Mike Welch, IT Director for the district.
Dan Schisler, School Board.
Teresa Torrance-Smith, teacher and parent.
Pat Gallion, the librarian.
Tor Blaisdell, a community member, and on a personal note, I just apologize for not being at the last meeting. I had a professional engagement out of state, so I would have been here, absolutely, and I apologize.
Dorothy Casera, community member.
Yes, Senator, community member, parent. Dale Leslie, maintenance director.
Dolores Gonzalez, Morgan Teacher for reading enrichment and Chestnut language.
Holy Hall, Health and Physical Education.
Joanne Hilleman, parent and architect.
Ned Gilman, School Board.
Keith Comas, I'm with NAC Architecture.
Mitch Williams, community member and parent.
And I'm Tom Golden from NAC Architecture.
Tim Mead, International.
Ben Mount, Transportation and Emergency Preparedness.
That
We
everyone-
could do this. I'm Ted Hansen, the community member.
You don't have to.
Are there any questions to say something?
Okay,
Okay.
moving on.
I have a question
Oh,
about
sorry.
what you were talking about.
Yes, you had a question.
Where do aesthetics come into this? In other words, you know, decide where we're gonna put everything, but let's say we have this wing or these two wings or whatever, what are they gonna look like?
And we will get into that in this process. We will talk about materials and massing of the building, not just planned layouts. I guess I should have said that earlier. We'll get, and in fact, tonight we'll show you the start of the three-dimensional possibilities for the designs we do have. So as we zero in on one, hopefully one scheme, we can then develop that one further each time. I guess next thing on our agenda is just the ed specs, and I think that's just to kind of update you with what has happened so far before we even put pen to paper and started drawing any drawings at all. That's a process where we met with a different committee, mostly made up of Morgan Middle School representatives of different educational departments, and that's where everybody said, here's the space I need and which spaces I need. And of course, when that was all requested, it was a building that was about twice as big as we could afford. So it's a kind of a give and take process of zeroing in on what our overall square footage target is, because right now the square footage is directly tied to overall cost of the project. So if we can control the square footage, we can control the costs. So that process has happened, and I think most, if not all of you, have been given a copy of that spreadsheet that is basically numbers that say so many general classrooms at such square feet, and it tallies it down at the bottom. So
Is that April 20th?
yes,
It hasn't been changed.
it has not been changed. So that's what we work with when we start to lay out the building, making sure that all of those spaces that are on that spreadsheet are accounted for in the building. Now, some of it might be grouped into larger spaces so that we know, we have to fit practice rooms or something in a music room, but we're just showing the total square footage right now that encompasses all of those spaces. We haven't quite broken it down to every single space yet. Any other questions? Jeff?
Is there, will there be a point in time where we can ask specific questions about the, where things stand at the moment? In terms of how the decision was made?
In terms of the
to allocate what you did, or how you compromised all of those different things?
We want to address any
Yeah, I'd say
specifics of
yes,
that
let's
right
do
now?
that right now.
Okay, sure, we'll do that right now.
So in looking at this, if you don't mind, I'll just launch right into it.
Okay.
In looking at these numbers, I see significant increases in one or two areas, like for example, phys ed, which obviously they need. I asked the question last time about the wing space, and as it says in the minutes, there was no plan at this time, even though I do have the ed spec recommendations, at least from a couple of the folks that were involved in it, that did recommend an expansion. I also, and obviously they asked for the moon in terms of the space they need for teaching and so forth. So I guess I'm sort of curious, and I can ask very specific ones if you want, but I guess I'm just sort of curious how you sort of weeded out what you did. And I have to confess that part of it is when we talk about the auditorium, it's the existing space. There's no expansion or anything. There's simply the addition of a sound booth. That's the only thing that I see. On the other hand, I do see other areas that are expanding, and I'm sure for good reasons. Today, we just heard 2 classrooms are being added. How does all that come together? I mean, I don't care if you want to If you don't want to deal with wing space, I understand, but some kind of understanding of the process would be very helpful at this point.
Do you want me to start? And I mean, you were obviously heavily directly involved in that. You know, like I said, it's very much a give and take process because everybody does ask for, you know, what would be ideal.
Right, absolutely.
And so there's a certain amount that we can do that includes the entire committee. I mean, nobody wants to stand up and say, well, you don't need that space, and sort of, as our colleague puts it, gore somebody else's ox at the expense of a program. So it's a balancing act. It's sort of a prioritization of the spaces that are most important for the school's curriculum and function. And then
I can speak to some specifics, I think. The 2 extra classrooms in particular. When Tom and I began this conversation almost 2 years ago now, it seems like, we had planned for 18 general classrooms, so that's not science classrooms, not specialties teaching spaces like the music classrooms and art. And so we were operating on a 7-period day. Now we have this sort of quasi 6-period day where teachers teach 1 less class per day, but have the kids for longer. And so what that does is it generates a need for more classroom teachers. We're fine where we're at right now, and the original ed specs we would have opened the doors and we would have had what we needed. However, we know that the K1 classes, which would be the next 2 groups to come in after we open, are a full section of kids larger, and we wouldn't have room on year 2. And so that's where the conversation about having 2 additional classrooms came from, is not wanting to open our doors and like lay down a portable at the same time. So that was that specifically. In terms of, there were several things. So the auditorium, obviously that's a big one. The requests that were taken off of, that were on the ed specs that got taken off were a scene shop and a dressing room.
Sure.
And so there wasn't, at least in the conversation, by the time the conversations had started, I don't think expanding the stage was ever really, to add wing space was ever really on the ed specs. I mean, it might have been requested, but I don't remember that even being a part of the conversation. I'd have to talk to Steve, who's another one of the architects. But we came to the hard decision that we would probably need to strategize where using adjacencies to put classrooms that could be used for dressing rooms.
Sure.
And then we've talked about putting like a makeup mirror with makeup lights in the choir room, say, so that there would be that available. And then the reality that when the 8th graders leave the high school, there will be storage again. And so it used to be that all the costumes were stored there, quite a bit of props and all of that. So trying to figure out what can we use that we currently have in order to make that happen. Because what this doesn't address is it does have the sound and lighting booth, but the design development part is where we would get into rigging, sound, all of those things. And so that isn't, this is just identifying how much space there is. So, that's how the conversation about the auditorium went versus, if we had, and that's where Tuesday night we had a community input meeting. And so one of the requests was, could something like a green room or a dressing room, could something like that be put in as an alternate bid or a contingency? If there's enough money, this could be done, kind of thing.
And if I could just respond now, I certainly understand that to create spaces that are so specialized that they can't be used for anything else is really kind of a dumb idea. And I'm not suggesting that in the least, right? Because any sort of proposal for that type of thing, absolutely, you want flexible space that is, first it's used for teaching, if it can be used for other things, that I think that's what I think anybody's hoping for. In the ed spec process, we went through that, many times at Central. You always ask for the moon, and you just, hope you can get even part of it off the ground. I guess is what you're really looking at.
Step one is good.
But as I say, I think again, in just trying to reconcile what I'm seeing with what I'm seeing, I know some places need to expand. The idea of at least having a little more room in the wing space is as much a safety issue as it is an educational issue. And so understanding why that's not possible as opposed to other things that are going to be built brand new because of the nature is part of where my question comes from.
And I don't know enough about that because that really wasn't part of the conversation that I was ever in on. Just to kind of talk about a few other areas just for context for everybody. Our largest science room right now that has sort of been dubbed the ideal science room is 1,250 square feet. And so of course the science department wanted at least that because the feeling of going backwards, so to speak. We did have to give a little bit on that and went to the 1,150 because there just was such a finite amount of space. And classroom sizes, Paul has long since the beginning of this said he wants something comparable to the high school. We went through and measured, and since NAC happened to do the high school, they had down that they were 890, give or take, about 66 square feet. And that the staff had asked for 930 as kind of a minimum, 31 by 31. And so that we did have to also give that was going to be 890, not the 930. That would be ideal. One of the spaces that I wasn't aware of that would have to have a significant increase that probably nobody even really pays a whole lot of attention to, but from what a traditional middle school kitchen would be designed as, had to be very different because our school is the district commodity storage, so they had to increase square footage in the cafeteria, or excuse me, in the kitchen area just alone for the walk-in coolers and freezers and things like that. So it really was coming down to looking at all of those kinds of square footage. So if we have to increase because it's a district commodity storage, where does that square footage come from? I
know that we also did not account for an in-house suspension space, so that was sort of completely added square footage.
And the other thing that had been just sort of just lost in the translation, we have what's called a low incidence high needs special education program, and the square footage that was allocated in the original document was about half of what she has. And so, and given that we're talking about students who need hospital beds, need multiple different kinds of wheelchairs, that had to be absorbed. And so one of the things we looked at was, okay, 3 years from now, we're going to have what's called computers on wheels, or cows. So let's get rid of tech labs that are dedicated tech labs, with the exception of the career and tech ed department. And so that was a lot of the conversation too of what can we really find as a balancing act for that. So I'm somewhat biased because I was part of the conversation, but I do believe that we really tried to look at every area as what's absolutely necessary versus what would we like. And I think everybody, because the health and fitness department, in a perfect world, let me pull that up, would have liked a dedicated health classroom, and that the multi-purpose mat room would actually be a competition-sized gym, and that would have added an additional 2,400 square feet that we really, at one point, really were trying, what could we piecemeal to make that happen? And there was just no way without sacrificing too many other areas to get that second competition gym. And so, so that was a hard decision too. It's like coming down to all of those, what people wanted versus what would fit within them. So I don't know if that answers your question.
It does, and I definitely appreciate, you know, what you're saying, and I know you well enough, and I know whoever I remember was on there. You know, I know what your intentions are, and so I have no trouble with that. I hope you can also see, though, that when we're trying to reconcile these sorts of things, and there are, you know, just to have an explanation is very helpful. So that helps. Thanks.
I just want to clarify. I believe the extra 2 classroom rooms are in the ed specs we were given and are in the diagrams we were given last time. So it's not an add from anything we've seen.
It's just been an affirmed add. So
it's going on what I heard.
Yep. Yeah. So they were at the budget. In order for it to still be within budget, the board approved a transfer of $694,000 and some odd dollars to balance the budget so that we don't start off having to make up ground somewhere else. So that was something the board approved last Wednesday night.
I guess what I want to do is just voice 2 thoughts, and I guess try not to rush ahead of me to assume where I'm going with these thoughts. But the first thought is that I had a fear 6 months ago when we did the TCD that something needed to be said about a particular element that what's the word I'm looking for, curricular need for the arts in the Ellensburg School District as a whole, the high school and the middle school, so basically the whole thing. And at the last meeting, I drafted a list of things that I thought people would be very responsive to and would serve the curricular needs of the students. Again, not a wish list for Valley Musical Theater or anybody else. Just, okay. And at the time, I think everybody remembers, I met with some very vocal resistance, and I was hijacking the process, and et cetera, et cetera. And then some very reasonable people saying, well, I don't think this is the time to have this conversation. And I said, okay, well, when is the time to have this conversation? Because once the bond's passed, then we really won't have the kind of input into the process, okay? So I had that list, and then I made a proposal which did include expanded wing space into the ed spec, into my recommendations regarding ed spec. And I don't think that anything I said was new. I am totally down with multifunctional space. I'll get to that in a second. But when I proposed all that stuff 6 months ago, nobody said to me, oh, Tor, you know, a green room's not going to happen. Or, oh, Tor, you know, it's unrealistic to think that you're going to have storage at Morgan. Okay, now I understand some of that can't be predicted, but I feel like some of it could. And I feel a little bit like, you know, everything was happy, but now we're down to the point where decisions are being made, okay, and I understand all the strictures. So, that being said, okay, I am totally in agreement with Jeff, what he said about absolutely multifunctional space, that idea of putting dressing room, I mean, it's fabulous, okay? But I also have learned a little bit of history in the community since I've been here. And one of the histories of the community was, and I'm just going to say this, okay? Valley Musical Theater invested an incredible amount of time and money and effort into raising money to make the Morgan Performance Space, or whatever you want to call it, the auditorium, a more usable space for the kids. Seats, a fire curtain, a curtain, okay, like well over $100,000 to raise that money. And at the time, I don't know who the administration was, it doesn't really matter, there was an understanding, a quid pro quo understanding about usage and don't worry and everything will be fine. Administrations change, new people come in, we don't know from any quid pro quo, all bets are off. Okay, this is not by way of a complaint, please don't misunderstand. This is by way of once burned, twice wary, okay? So when we say that there will be rooms dedicated for multiple purpose use, right? As a member of the arts community, but more importantly, as a parent of a child who starts at Morgan next year and is passionate about arts education, what is my guarantee that 5 or 6 years from now, people are going to say, well, that room was never intended for that purpose, so we're not going to use it for that. In other words, what's the guarantee that it's really going to be even a partially dedicated space? Well, we needed a room to put the typewriters, so we put them in the dressing room, you know. And I don't know, Michelle, I don't know what the answer to that question is, because I don't know that we can, you know, write up a contract or something. But I can tell you it has me really concerned, because I've seen it in my 6 or 7 years here, time and time again. You know, you mentioned the costumes being stored over at the high school. That was a huge, hairy deal. I mean, they didn't want them, and then they wanted to put them backstage at the little theater, and then the staff there didn't want them, and you know, it was one thing after another. You always felt like the ugly stepsister, right? You always felt like the unwanted cousin, you know? So I guess that's what I'm trying to say. I'm really concerned about that, and I think, again, not by way of a complaint, by way of all the norms that we talked about. How can we make sure that this happens right for the kids? That's it. That's it.
How would you make sure about any other area in the building that wouldn't be changed? That was what comes up to my mind. It might be that technology goes this way and science goes this way, and you change and you renovate.
Right, well, the
I don't know if
advantage...
it's any different than music or art or PE or something.
Oh, I totally understand. But the advantage, say, that PE has is that that facility is built in such a way that it's much harder to put, you know, a biology class in the gym, right? But if you have a room that you could fill with desks and typewriters, and all of a sudden, you know, it's something else.
I think now I understand a little better about what your question is. We have dedicated, in my mind, 3 arts rooms, well, 4. If we have the instrumental music room, vocal music room, visual arts, and then what we're calling a maker space, which is the future of, you know, whether it's the old way we think of industrial arts or, you know, something like that. The only guarantee that I have is that those programs are growing, and so there won't be, we wouldn't be able to not have them. A large part of what we do is driven by student interest and program needs, and so to have to say that the choir room is no longer needed, we wouldn't be able to do that because we wouldn't not have a choir. Now, if choir is only meeting 1 time a day, can we figure out how could they use the auditorium for their teaching space and shuffle things, but it would be driven by program. Because one of the things that we've run into, for instance, with health and fitness, since that's kind of the comparison right now, is when this building was built originally, they had the gym. Well, as each of these wings was added on, they added that small upper gym, auxiliary gym, which is kind of a mat room now, and that's it. And so as the population of the whole grew, the core didn't. And so that's something I think we have to be really wary of, whereas designing a room for a choir room, it's always going to be able to be used as a choir room as long as we have choir. I can't promise anything because I may not be here in 6 years. And so,
yeah.
and you may not, you know, the
Right,
2 of us
right.
may be long gone from this, and so I think as long as we build a facility that honors the programs and the interests of our community's kids, that we're going to have a facility that can continue to grow with that and modify and adjust. I mean, for instance, we're adding a .2 band teacher because band program's growing like crazy.
Is there, Michelle, is there a cap on the number of students who can enroll in band or choir? None. So any kid that comes and says, I want band, they can get into band.
We have, and we toyed with that idea because Don May is one person, and he would.
1.5.
Well, good point, that's why he's the teacher of the year. And we had 100 kids sign up for beginning band this next year. And I don't care how good you are, 100 sixth graders trying to learn instruments, not gonna be a pretty sight if you put all 100 together. So, and that's a good example of growing with the program, rather than saying, okay, we've got these kids coming in, we're gonna need these programs. We said, no, we know what the program is that we need. And so we'll be adding a .2 band teacher for next year. So the same thing would happen for choir or for orchestra.
Is the room size, this I don't know the answer to, is the room size that he asked for the band commensurate with what was come up with?
That one I think we increased slightly.
We increased it slightly. It's
but I think we had originally figured more practice rooms and offices and those kinds of things that they figure we don't really need that much. And so a lot of that area that was dedicated to that was back into the overall room. So it is by, I want to say 250 square feet.
Yeah, the proposed difference was quite a bit larger.
Yeah.
Because, you know, because in fairness, I believe Don was thinking in terms of, well, if we want to be, in a sense, the most cost efficient, right? You make a room big enough to fit that 100 kids in at once, and you get a great teacher in there who can handle that situation. And that saves you from having to divide it and, you know, add another .2 for another half of the band, you know, that kind of thing.
I think this is a great segue. I want you to finish. And then
well,
I
okay,
want to segue.
and so the existing space I think is about 1,300. The proposed space is about 1,600. But that's not going to get you 100 kids, right? And so.
And as a middle school person, 100 kids, there's a safety issue.
Right.
So.
And I totally understand that. I have a hard time envisioning my own kid in with 100. No thanks. But again, the spirit of the question is to understand how the process took place. And again, knowing you, I believe that it happened equitably. When the differences still exist, it's still good to hear that. Thanks.
So I think we're going to visit this in a lot of different ways, especially around the auditorium over the next couple of months. And so I know that Tom and Keith are going to address some of this, I think even tonight in proximity, which will start to talk about potential use of a green room and a makeup room and so on out of those. So why don't we start into the design, and we can certainly revisit this either afterwards or next time. Or
well, there are way more important things to talk about than a green room, okay? It's an important, but there's way more important stuff.
And maybe that's what we need to do is prioritize.
All that stuff has got to be dealt with.
I was just reminded by Linda we were going to take some questions from our observers. Do we have any questions at this point? Okay. So back to the room.
Okay. I'm going to let Keith take over and kind of walk you through what we've been up to in the last week.
So, first of all, I just wanted to show you a couple slides that people who were at the last meeting have seen before, but again, just a reminder of some of the things that we're seeing as givens. And so this diagram shows all of the existing buildings at Morgan Middle School, the original 1929-1935 piece, 53 editions, 66, 94 editions. And one of the givens that we're working with is the fact that we would save the buildings that are shown here in white in this diagram, and that the buildings that are in gray would be demolished and replaced by new construction. The question is, how are those new pieces positioned relative to the existing or the original pieces? So one of the things that we showed again last time was this the west facade as it is today. A couple of major things that probably don't need much mention, but I'm still going to do it. The 1966 edition had a big impact on this west facade, blocking the main entry and the whole north side of the original classroom wing. And then the 1935 edition, which added this appendage that affected the symmetry of that original facade. And it's hard to get an appreciation for this elevation because you can't really see it with the new additions in front of the building. But this is the way we know it looked originally. And so this is something that you might see again and again because we believe this is something that we're hearing clearly is important to the community. This is a piece that I think Dave mentioned we want to showcase in the way, in the development of the project. We want to make sure that we showcase this original west facade. So we see those as givens. Last time we talked about some different configurations that we had looked at in order to think about how we would add pieces around those existing buildings that we were saving, that we thought were givens. We had looked at some possibilities within our office and we kind of rejected them. But this was the sum total of what we looked at. We brought options that showed a north wing, which was similar to what was considered pre-bond. We looked at a symmetrical option, a compact option, a south wing, a west wing, and the three different versions that we brought to the last meeting, this north wing, a symmetrical, and a compact option. There were some potentially functional fatal flaws with this compact edition and some other concerns. And so our marching orders from that last meeting were to continue to take a further look at the north wing option and the symmetrical option. So that's what I want to show you new tonight, the development of those two. So one of the, I would say, comments related to the north scheme that we had shown previously, we were talking about sort of a court space that helped showcase this original facade, and in the previous scheme we had the kitchen and service delivery that sort of was intruding on that court space, and so that was a comment that made a lot of sense. And so this option looks at moving that kitchen out of this court space and away from the feature of that west elevation. It means that the commons kind of stretches out in this area. There's this kind of a main or secondary entry here, and definitely a main auditorium entry, but also a kind of a main entry at this north end of the building, directly into the commons. The way entries would work, at least a couple of entries would be possible before school. But once school starts, entries would be locked off, and there would be one point of entry directly into the reception area of the administration for security purposes. So visitors would have to pass through that reception to get into the building. And that's a concept that we will utilize on all the options that we show you, just in different ways. So I'm just going to kind of walk through the spaces here. Again, with the entry and admin reception here, the rest of the administration and counseling spaces are here shown in red. High needs spaces adjacent to the administration space.
What does high needs mean?
Senior special.
So there's also possibility for entry into these high need spaces. It's more convenient for those students. Classrooms, staff lounge, restrooms for the commons, art room that's again within that sort of featured facade, another bank of classrooms, flanking the auditorium to the south is a band and choir suite. The existing gym would stay. I think we talked about this last time. The existing fixed bleachers that sit above a girls' locker room would be modified to expand the gym space, and then there would be telescoping or movable bleachers in that south end of the gymnasium. Again, it creates more teaching space, more usable gym space, given the flexibility of the movable bleachers.
When you say girls' locker room, is it at
The girls' locker room that exists today below those bleachers.
so it's in there?
In this case, it would be modified. Those locker rooms would go away because of the level differences. They wouldn't fit there anymore, and so girls' and boys' locker room fit in this space at the end.
Am I right to understand that what's currently the boys' locker room would now be split in half?
Correct.
And then, so we'd house more students than we currently house, but now we'd house, instead of just boys, half the school population, we'd house the entire population in the same space.
Yes, and we believe that, you know, based on locker rooms that we've designed in the past, that we can house the numbers that we need in a more efficient way and have that happen in that space.
Okay.
Part of it is there are some existing spaces that we're using, so it's not a complete one-for-one. We think we can make that split.
Okay, because the estimate would be 5 classes, which would come out to roughly 150 students a period, so.
Okay. And I believe we have that accounted for in our square footage that we have in the specs. We'll continue to work on that. Go ahead.
The hallway between the gym and the lockers, safety reasons, what's the reason?
Well, a lot of it is to provide good access into the lockers and preserve that gym floor. If you've got kids coming out of the locker rooms out to the fields, traipsing across the gym floor, out of the locker rooms and into the fitness area, it just eases circulation, sort of preserves that space and makes circulation a little easier.
We could test that a little bit though. I mean, it doesn't have to occur. It's a better circulation solution, but we have done locker rooms that abut right up to a gym. So there are ways to do that, but you know, that's certainly something we could look at.
Students would learn, you know, perhaps if you're going to the boys' locker room, you've got to go down this corridor. If you're going to the girls' locker room, you've got to go down this corridor. We could have exits directly out of the locker rooms to the fields, and that would alleviate some of those maintenance concerns. But it's worth looking at, sure.
And the locker room gym, or the hallway between the locker rooms, would reduce the amount of wear and tear on the gym floor. And when we had the old section of the building open, traffic flow, we didn't have as many problems because students would enter from 2 different sides.
Right.
So it wasn't quite as congested during passing time.
Yeah. Having a loop circulation makes a big difference in traffic flow, congestion, that passing time between class periods.
You might want to point out fitness and some PE multi-purpose on both sides.
Right. So that means, again, that's a good one, David, because let's say you got girls here going to the multi-purpose room, they're going to traipse through the gym to get there. So there would be, and conversely, boys here getting fitness and have to traipse through the gym.
Okay, does the stage open both ways?
No, that
that
wasn't planned. I think with rigging that would get very complicated.
So where are the PE offices?
So the PE offices are part of that locker room space.
My only concern about having that hallway is supervision of students while changing from street clothes to PE clothes, having that division of space.
Yeah, and we'll work that out. That's a detail that I assure you we can. We're very in tune to work out that supervision block. Sort of continuing the tour, we have the multi-purpose space here, aerobics mat room, again multi-use. On the north side, fitness space, PE storage, CT space, which is the maker space that Michelle mentioned, CT classroom, of course mechanical space, some storage, and the kitchen and serving commons, restrooms flanking either side of the auditorium that serve the commons, would serve the auditorium and serve the gymnasium. We've got a strategy for how we might compartmentalize the building to allow different events to occur without opening up the entire school.
In this sketch you gave us, you have on the second floor mechanical
Yes.
on top of the lockers?
Yes.
That's just for the locker, for the...
No. Should I go to the second floor?
No, I'm just trying to get the...
Yeah. Remind me if I forget when we get to the second floor.
Could you explain the bid alternate in
Uh,
terms of for that second fitness area, which would be the same size as the current mat room?
Well, let me see if I answer your question. So what we show here in the blue, the base bid is essentially a 42 by 84 square foot space. It's essentially sized for 2 full mats, and in that mat configuration, it's got to be those dimensions.
Yeah.
And then in the bid alternate, what we show is a space that is big enough to have a full size basketball court.
Some staff. I guess how do you obtain the bid alternate, or is that at the end of the process?
Yeah, so what that means is we design the building both ways. We design it with this smaller multi-purpose room, and we also design it with the larger full-size gym. And then when we ask contractors for bids, they give us one price that includes the smaller room, and they give us another price for the larger room, and depending on where the bids come in relative to budget, you can accept the bid alternate or not.
Okay, thank you.
I have one question just that pertains to that. I did a lot of the phone calling, trying to get people to vote, and gym space was huge. I would have tracked that it was probably at least 60% of my phone calls asked about gym space, and if this was going to help with that. So the bid alternate, like, is it like a 3% chance that?
I want to address that. We don't know the chance. And 2 things are happening right now. Based on our last meeting, we were asked by Michelle and Paul to make the gym an alternate, to try to see if we can get it in.
The second gym.
The second gym, the auxiliary gym, yeah. It probably won't be big enough to have much spectator, if that was a question I heard. It's not gonna have bleachers, but perimeter space, yes, for some chairs or standing space or whatever. But more to the point, we just won't know for another 9 or 10 months anyways on whether we're gonna get that space or not. We're gonna work very hard because we know that that is a desirable space for the community. But again, it goes back to the available funds. The other thing, and we don't know what's going to happen in 10 months or a year, we're in an inflationary period in the construction industry. And we're seeing this not only in Western Washington, but it's now occurring in Eastern Washington. And, you know, it eats up funds. The cost of construction goes up. So to try to tell you a percentage today, or, you know, what do we think is going to happen, we have no idea. We really don't. But what we can tell you is that the bid alternate will be in there, and with our general contractor, construction manager, who is Graham Construction, they're on board now, and they're going to be looking at this all along the way. So we're going to try to get it in.
But just to be clear, there is additional gym space. Again, with the fixed bleachers going away, whereas before you really had one one court. This can be divided into sort of 2 smaller courts, and definitely 2 teaching spaces with more wood gym floor space. Plus, this multi-purpose room is bigger than the existing mat room that's on that second level above the lockers.
Just lots of competitions going on of any kind.
How large is the PE storage to the left of the multi-purpose room? How large is that?
I don't know what the numbers are. We're close to the total. Tom, if you could tell me.
In total, they have 1,800 allocated.
For that space?
Well, or total, I don't know.
Total athletics and PE.
Okay, the reason I ask is because depending on what goes on in that space, if it's truly just storage, that actually provides, I would hope, a reasonable sound buffer between what goes on in the multi-purpose room and in the choir room.
Correct.
At least that's what I would hope.
That's true.
Is there, I mean, and based on your response, I assume there isn't any thought at this point to any other sound, reinforcement or anything for that particular wall?
Well, it's a detail that we work out. We're pretty sensitive to that. For example, there are support spaces that we show by these little secret lines that I'm showing that mean that we're thinking about a separation between the band and choir. Sure. So there's that buffer space.
There's also an acoustical engineer that will be part of the design team. So in addition to what they're showing here as far as ancillary spaces between sensitive sound spaces, layer on top of that the work of the acoustical engineer on how to build a wall or a ceiling.
This is a sensitive issue based on what happened at the high school. Because at the moment, during certain gym classes, it's very difficult for music classes to take place. So because of the way the wall was constructed between the gym and the music room. So that is
yeah, and I think we're heading in the right direction because in this configuration, those band and choir rooms are pretty much they're almost on an island.
Which is just what we want, of course. we don't want to talk to anybody.
It's a private exotic island.
Just because I absolutely don't know the answer to this question, I'm sure someone's going to ask me. Can you talk a little bit about, or can anybody talk about, not extracurricular, whatever events there might be, but what the curricular reasoning is for the quote-unquote, lack of a better word, other gym or extra gym? What's the curricular imperative? Yeah.
The imperative is with the, number one, the size of our kids, right? And we're bringing all the 8th graders back. We put 5 kids on that gym space, and the thing that might be
5 kids.
Or 5 classrooms. Sorry.
It's like those are big kids. My kid's not even active.
That gym space that's proposed, you can physically see it in real time of if you remove the bleachers and have collapsible bleachers. The hallway exiting to what used to be the tennis courts is about 15, 16 feet. I imagine that they would take up a portion of that space with the collapsible bleachers, so you don't gain a whole lot of space for kids to move dynamically. If we wanted to stack them in lines and do push-ups and crunches all period, tons of space, but for them to safely move and exhibit locomotive skills, they're not full-size gyms. So there would be 2 side-by-side gyms that would be small, but they wouldn't be full-size gyms. And that's why I asked the bid alternate question of, currently in our upstairs mat room, we have 2 full mats. One, based on where the stairs goes about halfway. So it's not quite too full, but it's close. And with 30 to 33 kids up there, it's a small space to have them actually move and be physically active in a maybe strength, yes. Running or locomotive skills, not so much. And so that's what the importance would be, because we're looking at larger numbers with not as large a space. The fitness room is larger. The mat room, or that secondary, I call it the multi-purpose room, would be slightly larger than upstairs.
And a 5 class per period is numerically necessary? It's a numerical imperative?
It's likely, just because of, you figure if you have, like right now, for next year, we'll have 10 sections of 6th grade PE. And if you extrapolate that, so 30 sections, you've got 6 teachers teaching 5 classes each. Some will have prep period from time to time, but it never works out as beautifully as lining that all out. So it's likely that there will be times that there will be 5 classes going on. Not
great,
every
thank you.
period.
Yeah, that's great. That answers the question.
But by the way, can I just respond to that? This is an important question for us because those of us, you know, who are in touch with the arts community, when we hear things like, you know, can you justify the curricular aspects of the auditorium, right? Against, can you, you know, and then we hear things like, well, we need a competition gym at the middle school. You see what I'm saying? I'm all for it in the sense that we need to be able to explain that to folks when they raise the question to us about just any of these facilities.
Right.
So we encounter the same questions from our standpoint when we're trying to deal with that. And so it's very helpful to hear exactly what you just said.
And I guess just so there's no confusion, I didn't say competition.
No, I know.
Okay.
No, I know you didn't, but it's already been said here.
Yeah.
That was part of the consideration.
So that's a great comment you made, Jeff. And to Foley, right?
Yeah.
To expand on just for a second on what you said, if you just count those, we call them teaching stations, just like a classroom, a teaching station.
Yeah.
We have 1, 2, 3, 4, and then I guess outside would be the 5th one. Is that how you'd be counting them?
But come winter time, then.
Or the health room.
But there's no designated health room at this time.
Well, yeah.
Right. So, and then you might want to talk about that relationship. For the sake of time, if we could hold comments and get through the 2 schemes and then come back to comments. 4 schemes. Whoa.
So, David reminded me to point out the relationship between the band choir area and the auditorium. Again, to think of these as flexible multi-use spaces where they might be used for dressing room, green room spaces with access to the auditorium and stage. So with this pause, I'll move on to the upper floor. And I'm going to start here. So we've got a mechanical space here that would serve probably, we haven't worked this out with mechanical engineers, but the idea is that this mechanical space would serve all of these. The mechanical space that you saw on the first floor would provide access into the tunnels that are below that exist today, and that would partially serve some of the classroom spaces. So hopefully that answers your mechanical question.
It seems like there's 3 different, there's an electrical, mechanical.
And trust me, those will change, because I've drawn little squares on a piece of paper. There's no engineering involved with that. It's an educated architectural guess. So up to the 2nd floor, we have 3 classrooms in this North Wing addition, science suite here, resource rooms kind of centered in that 2nd floor space. Michelle, resource rooms are...
Special education? Okay, so that, there's another special education space elsewhere.
So these are kids that are both in the main classroom and
One might be just a classroom where they're getting additional math support, or
But it's not as large.
typically the class size is around 15-ish. Try to keep it below that, but
and that's important. There's a couple reasons why the resource rooms are here. one. This is that original narrow bay. These are smaller than a regular classroom because of what Michelle mentioned as far as class size. And these are intentionally located kind of in the midst of destinations to other general classrooms, so there's no stigma attached to traveling to these resource rooms.
The reason I asked was the special, there were no resource rooms on the previous version.
Yeah, we split those. The square footage was in one big blob, and now we've split it into two different size blobs that equal the total we showed previously.
The two added classrooms, did that decrease the size of the other classrooms, or did it increase the footprint?
For our purposes, from when we started this schematic design phase, those classrooms were already part of the ed specs total square footage, so it hasn't impacted the spaces that were shown.
It did not decrease classroom size anywhere else. That's why it increased the budget, because it was
essentially new space
right.
that we had to account for. So it didn't take space out of somewhere else in order to get two classrooms. We just added.
Does that answer your question, Doris?
It does.
Oh, okay.
And just are these classrooms set where they are, or can the resource rooms be moved around?
Remember, this is one of 4 schemes.
Okay.
But that's not going to change, and this is the purpose of schematic design, to make sure that we have the rooms in the right location, the right adjacency. So part of this process is to
We knew
make sure
going
that we
in
have
to this that it was likely that the resource rooms would be in the historical portion of it. But the priority was to not have them be isolated, so that when somebody goes to the second floor, it's not, oh, you're going to the second floor classrooms. It's just, whether they're going, everybody is going to the second floor for science. So it's not, that's much like the high school is structured with all the resource rooms in one hall.
I understand that this seems a little, even though you're explaining it's not segregated, but they're all grouped together in one section. So I don't know if we can alternate some of the classrooms with the resource rooms.
But they're different sizes.
Too skinny.
I don't think folks maybe don't understand that that one wall is fixed. It cannot be moved, the hallway wall. In the 1929
Mostly.
building, for the most part.
Mostly.
In the 35 it can, but in the 29 it can't, and so that's the reason those classrooms can't be made any bigger. They can be made bowling alley classrooms, which none of us want. But we need them there. There you go.
So
I understand your concern, Dolores, and I think it's part of how we create the culture is going to be more important at that point.
We do sort of retain the existing stairwells that flank the auditorium. There's an open space here that drops down. It is open to that common space below, so there's a little sort of connection from that main auditorium entry up to the second floor where the balcony is. There are open spaces, so creating a higher volume in the new part of the commons, which is here. So,
when you say open, is that a 2-story ceiling?
correct.
Okay.
And then there's a circulation piece that passes through that space.
I'm jumping the gun, you're going into symmetrical, but when I looked at the preview, what you handed out last time, it seems like there's more classrooms in this section, in this north wing, than I saw in the symmetrical.
I think the count was right, and I think you had them up. There's 20 in the previous, and there's 20 here. So
They're supposed to be.
And just to make it easier to check, I've numbered them consecutively. There I just numbered them per floor, which is a little, so then you got to do the math. But when I click this, you'll see that we get to 20. So at least we've got it right now. And so here we're on the 3rd floor. again, sort of a bank of classrooms, and we sort of feature the library up on this new construction on the upper level. There was a comment last time about making that the library a special space that students would want to go to, kind of destination. Seemed to work well. We saw it sort of as a penthouse destination space.
So there's going to be an elevator there.
So,
You gotta get rid of the crotchety dungeon master before you
But having this being the new construction allowed us to, will allow us to sort of deal with the appropriate volume in the library, and there's potential for clear stories or skylights to daylight. This quarter happens to be pretty enclosed. There would be windows possible as there are today through the stairwells, but maybe we retain some of those existing skylights in that corridor as well.
I'm so sorry, because Mike, you might have already addressed this, but I thought when we were talking to TCB that we couldn't put classrooms at the end of that southern addition there because of the post or something. No?
Southern end is good, northern end not. It's the northern end that can't be reconfigured.
Oh, I thought it was the addition that was put on to.
No, that's the good one.
Oh,
there are, I guess,
That's why those classrooms are bigger.
okay, all right. I misunderstood that then. I thought that had to be the library.
A little bit more technical explanation of that. The original 1929 section uses bearing walls as the corridor walls, so they would be very difficult to move.
But we're still going to modify it.
Yeah, we can cut holes in them and things like that, but just to illuminate them and widen out the classrooms gets really expensive. The 35 section switched to more of a concrete post and beam type of situation. So while we have to work out exactly where those posts are, and we can't really move those, there's more options to open up the space.
So, moving on, we did these very simple massing diagrams to show how the, again, the volumes of these new spaces relate to the existing. And I'm going to shuffle through a couple of views. This is from the, looking from the east, but I want to get to this, this view here, where you can see that, again, this existing west facade is showcased at some level, balanced out by the 1935 edition and then the 2016 edition. So there is some respect for that, I guess, a balance about that, that existing 1929 facade, but it's but there are some differences between that and the symmetrical options that we looked at last time. That
so I'm going to be the timekeeper. We have 25 minutes to get through 3 schemes.
It's going to be fast. I'm moving on to the symmetrical options. There's a lot of similarities between these. That's why I think it's going to be pretty fast. There was a desire to have us look at making the existing main entry be the main entry for students and also the visitor entry. And this is a configuration that shows that. You can see we've created a vestibule. The way that works is when students are entering, they would pass through this vestibule. There would be doors that would be unlocked. When school is in session, doors would be locked. Visitors would be forced through that reception area and then into the school. A bit of the complication here is we're stringing out admin and counseling in here, particularly in this very narrow bay. So we're taking a narrow bay and we're dividing it up into 3 pieces. We don't know. We'd have to work with Michelle and her staff to figure out if that really works. We show a little bit more space here because we're nervous about the efficiency of that. Commons, because this admin counseling area is sort of stretched out to grab that vestibule at the main entry. The common space is a little bit tighter than you'll see in some of the other options. Excuse me. And then building, we have we balance the 2 wings, classrooms here. Again, that admin counseling, the high needs at this end, art. A lot of similarities. I think it is identical to what we just showed in that first option. Yes.
Any idea of the max population of the commons in this?
Yeah, we did a seating layout. We're going to get about 425. It's going to be a little more scrunched in this option than in some of the other options. So I'm going to jump up. So again, in this symmetrical option, we got science, resource, and then classrooms. Again, a pretty simple layout in this symmetrical scheme. And oh, by the way, you'll see that the second floor is identical in the 3 symmetrical options that I'm going to show you. Same with the upper floor, and it's also very similar to the previous option where we have the library and classrooms on that upper level. I want to back up real quick. One of the things that we like about the way this one worked out is there will be openings at either end of this corridor. There's a little extra space for kind of a little breakout area, some impromptu teaching or gathering. Again, a chance for some daylight views out the ends of these corridors, and then also the stairwells. So although the corridors are surrounded by classrooms, there's little pockets of little openings that allow that connection to the exterior and some daylight. We still have that open space down into the commons. Well, in this case, it would be down into that vestibule.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand. You said you had an open space. Where is it?
Right here, over that vestibule that's at the main entrance.
That's not right there above the main entrance, right?
It is.
It is.
It is.
Okay.
Where's the library?
And the library is on this 3rd floor. So the 3rd floors on these 4 schemes are virtually identical. So our second symmetrical option, we show a separate visitor entry here, separate from the main auditorium entry and the secondary student entry. Counseling is in this area, separated by reception, so visitors would come in, pass through this reception area, and then into the school if that's their destination. And then administration is sort of on the other side of that reception area. If you compare this to the first one, the big difference is that we've got a couple extra spaces in here, and the admin area sort of stretches up and grabs that that main entry. It means we've kind of scrunched these spaces in here a little bit. We'll have to test that in greater detail to see if it works. And it also means that we've got a little more generous common space where we can comfortably get that 425 seating. Let's see.
One of the things that this does is it essentially opens the commons the full width of the auditorium, which when you walk in, you kind of have that presence of the auditorium in front of you, and we sort of like that. I mean, I don't want to try to say that we've got a favorite child or anything, but that was one feature of this that I wanted to point that out.
It takes the idea of celebrating or showcasing that west facade one step further on into the building, where we also have the opportunity to celebrate that auditorium. And, with the strong symmetry of the original facade, again, we're just building on that symmetry.
How many feet from the entry to the front of the auditorium?
About 30 from here to here, about 35 feet.
That's the existing? 35 feet?
Exactly.
That's what I thought.
Could sort of see today.
Dolores, basically the hallway is what
Oh, where the
you're
black
gonna
door
see.
is, right? The black gate.
Where the roll down is, from there to the auditorium.
How how far would it be for an elderly folks to get from the parking lot to the auditorium in this version versus, you know?
When we develop parking, we'll know. But
Okay.
right now, we're just saying, maybe there's some parking here. We're sort of the transportation traffic issues are, we're in the midst of discussing.
It's not important.
those.
It is important. It is important. I mean, I'm just saying.
But also, Tor, they could enter in an evening setting, could enter from that secondary entrance and park right on the street.
And almost certainly you would. So,
Going back to the band choir, is it possible to move the band and the choir to facilities and swap it with fitness, CD, and swap those spaces? Then you wouldn't have the concern about the noise.
I think we have the noise issue addressed well in all of these, actually.
One of the things that that would do.
Here, so it's outside out.
Yeah, there's a much more direct
Well,
link.
but it's not that far.
It is,
Getting back and forth from here to the stage is kind of important.
Okay. Just a thought.
So, again, this is identical to the previous. This is identical to both of the previous.
Can I ask a quick question on the, can you back one slide? So this puts the common with a traditional, I mean, how does if you put a classroom on top of there?
We're gonna, so the commons is a big space.
Right.
And proportionally in a larger space, you'd like to have a higher ceiling. It's gonna cause us to work hard to maintain and maximize as much of that ceiling space as we can. In an ideal situation, we get about the same ceiling space that you have now in those classrooms. We did talk about the possibility of having some sort of ramp or steps that would lower this space and get a little more ceiling height in here. That's something we can talk about further as we move
I have a question. How tall is that common area?
Well, I'm thinking that in this case it's probably about 14 feet.
So it's like,
But I don't want to be held to that because we have to work out, you know, how the structure and mechanical electrical systems reside in that ceiling space.
But it's about the same height as what's in the cafeteria right now.
That's 14 feet. And again, it's going to be a trip. We work hard to get that.
Okay, so I just got some clarification that in regards to, you had mentioned 2 floors. A floor is, it sounds like it's considered 12 to 14 feet from floor to floor. And so a 14-foot ceiling would just be one, would not be a 2-floor room.
It's not a 2-story.
Right.
It's not a 2-story vault.
Classroom, all of that.
Okay.
And here, again, because we're dealing with an existing building, we aren't, we don't have the luxury of creating our own floor-to-floor heights. We're fixed with what is there existing.
I have another question, Michelle. Is there a specific height that's the minimum for schools in this city?
No, I think in talking, from what I've learned with working with these guys over the last several months, is it would be, you would design it to be proportional to the size of the room. So you wouldn't have you wouldn't have a gym with a short ceiling because the volume of noise wouldn't be able to be managed. So.
Well, I noticed that this ceiling is quite tall.
And actually, it's
No,
not.
this is not tall at all.
It would be a lot better if this were taller.
Yeah.
For the size room it was.
For everything. I teach in a space that's got a 7.5-foot ceiling right now, and you
Won't
feel
hold
like
ya.
you are constantly doing this. It is completely. You feel like you're compressed the whole entire time, and the noise just bounces in that space. Horrible. Hey Jeff, can I make throw out an idea that might help us with the wing space a little bit? Keith, can you point to the south stage wing area right there? Can we put a roll-up door right there and we could use that hallway space as wing space during
Well,
performances?
I already have a list of suggestions that go with that, but because one of the ways to mitigate that problem is two steps. One is to make it possible to seal off at least one corridor, right, on one side.
Right.
And with the understanding that there are safety exits either direction. So if there's a way to do that, even you know, I mean, preferably more soundproof than other. But the other would be to the current doors into the backstage area are, you know, they're standard doors. You turn that into something quite a bit larger, as long as it can be reinforced such that large pieces of things can move in and out of there. You're on your way to helping the situation.
Would you be willing to get rid of the storage space that's on the south side of the stage?
Based on this configuration, it would have to go anyway, because the only way that band and choir are going to get on stage is through that area, as it is. So that as far as that goes, that's already gone.
Okay.
Or again, I don't speak. I'm not an architect, but in my mind, that storage space has to leave anyway. So we lose that.
In my mind, I'm seeing that CTE area that can be used as
Scene shop.
Thank you, scene shop. Plus, you have your choir right across the hallway from your stage, which can be used as your staging area, I guess you would call it.
Green room, dressing room.
Green room, dressing room, staging area.
Right.
And like that.
And the only issue that enters in at that point in time is that the space in itself can be flexible to allow that to happen. But at some point, you got to move the costumes in, and you got to move the makeup mirror in, and all that stuff has to go in there.
Well,
if it has to go in and out every single day, you know, during the run of a show, and I'm talking about just, you know, the High School Musical, for example, right? Even in that instance, the space in itself is flexible to be used at that point. But it's, I mean, if the stuff is going to be stored at the high school, for example, that's great, except during the run of the show where it's got to be present. And so there's got to be a place for it to be while the show is going on, right? Which can't intrude on the teaching space, or at least, you know, or create a problem there. So you see, again, there are ways to make it work. I'm not worried about that. The hard part is in a sense working out the logistics and making sure that we, in a sense, have an understanding right from the start how that's going to work. And so, like I said, bigger doorways to the backstage area, that solves some, especially if we can seal off part of that. That mitigates some of the wing space issues. But as soon as we go in from that south side, that storage area is now gone. So now
see, I'm looking at this schematic here, and I see two restrooms right there off of the band and choir rooms, which means you can't block that hallway, otherwise you have no restrooms on the bottom floor.
There's some on the other side.
So for next time,
Yeah.
go on. No, wait, I want to ask everybody to do something. For next time, I want everybody to think about all the ways, besides performances, besides vocal, that we can use the auditorium for educational purposes. I think it would be a good thing to help the school inform them of different ways. So if you guys brainstorm and think about that between now and 2 weeks from today.
I already have a list.
Excellent.
That's it.
Thanks, Jeff.
What's the projected seating capacity as it stands now?
We haven't got to that level of detail. Somewhere in the vicinity of what the existing seating is.
Okay, so it would potentially be able to fit the entire population of the middle school? Only because that's going to affect what we say it's a
no. No, it's not. I mean, because if we upgrade the seating in the balcony, we lose seating, and if the 100 square feet go to a light and sound booth, and wherever it's at, that loses seating. And then things like, does the stage come out further? That would lose seating. So we really won't be able to put our whole student body in there because in 2000, 2020, we will be upwards of probably 750 plus
Right.
students, and so.
And the current seating is 738?
No, I think it's just about
No,
700.
I looked at the specs.
Okay.
This morning.
Okay.
And I think it's in that vicinity. So, and therein lies my parting shot, and that is that if it doesn't fit the student body, we need to figure out how to make that work, because that's exactly, if we're going to put the students first, they all ought to be in the auditorium for assemblies and for any other school events that are appropriate to fit in there.
They'll never all fit in the auditorium, but they all will fit in the gymnasium with the bleachers and the floor. So when you have 900 students in 2000, was it 900 in 2018?
No, we'll have about 750.
750. We'll never get 750 students in that auditorium. It's just not going to happen. But we will in the gymnasium.
Which is appropriate for certain things and definitely not for others. So, anyway, that's my parting shot.
Let me ask you again. You can't have that stage open both ways. Is that a structural wall?
It is a structural wall.
So you can't do it. It's a thought, you know? It's not an uncommon thing.
You can cut holes in it,
But then you just
limited.
cut a hole in your stage.
I guess I would pose the question: what advantage do you see out of doing?
You want to get the whole student body in there and have a stage?
No.
You put them,
I don't think that was
put
his.
them in the gymnasium. A lot of schools don't have that. They have a stage. It's all in the gymnasium with the stage.
That's a good point.
I think the reason Jeff wanted the whole student body in the auditorium versus the gym is probably mostly around the acoustics. The acoustics in the gym likely won't be as good as they are in the auditorium.
I'm talking about for the principal wants to give a talk or something. Or I'm not talking about a player.
Yeah. But again, the acoustics would be a little better now.
I'm just looking at flexibility.
Sure.
When the band performs, that's 100 people up on the stage out of the auditorium.
Yeah.
Perfect. Then we could do it.
So I want to jump to the third option. Again, here we have the commons that stretches out along that whole facade again, and down to the south. So the big difference with this scheme is that these spaces swap with these spaces. It means that deliveries happen on the south side versus the north side. If we've got bus drop-off and parking, it means that bus drop-off and parking, kids would come through the secondary entry. We wouldn't have service and delivery kind of functions at that secondary entry. We would still use the existing 1929 entry as a main entry and an auditorium entry. We'd have a visitor entry here, which would pass through reception and then on into the school if that is a destination. Counseling and admin here. High needs, again, with the drop-off, maybe it's separate entry into the high needs area. And again, these spaces just sort of flip-flop north and south. And okay, floors are identical. With that, again, I wanted to show the massing. Again, we build a new piece here to balance out the 1935 edition, 2 new symmetrical wings. We flank the gym and auditorium with new construction. Again, it's really all about the symmetry. And you can see here that we'd have that symmetry. We'd likely develop this new third-story piece in a way that would complement the 1935 edition. So that's how the volume sort of play out.
Of the two options you're showing us, which one provides the most structural support for the existing building?
It wouldn't be a differentiator. You'd make the structural work regardless.
Will the engineers be looking at which one, which plan's best?
No. Both plans will have to meet current code requirements, and we'll meet them in both cases. It wouldn't be something that would drive you to one option versus the other.
With the north wing as opposed to this one, is there more square footage, acreage, open space, ground space? It appears to me, if I look at the north wing one, that there's more open space, maybe for whatever.
Yeah.
Is that right or wrong?
I honestly think it's probably about the same. Here, whoops, we have a bigger area out here and a sort of smaller area that's flanked by the two symmetrical wings, with the north wings coming way out here, so it's a complementary area.
Basically, if you take that south symmetrical piece and stick it on the end of that, you have your north scheme. So footprint, I mean, it may be off by 1% or 2, but the overall footprint of the building is about the same. It's just in a different configuration.
So that's all the options that we have.
Just real quick, are the two wings on the symmetrical design, can they be built on top of for future expansion? Or what's your vision for when we need to build more classrooms?
David had a pretty good answer for that last time. I think to make that work, you'd have to start the foundation and build the foundation and all the structure through those 2 stories to accommodate that feature. So it's money that you'd have to build and spend now for that. It often doesn't ever happen that you would add those third story spaces.
You can extend the wings.
Yeah.
And that would
It's
likely
much
be
easier to
better.
extend the wings.
Yeah, you
You
don't
have to
Because then
move
you don't
out
have to
of
pre-build
that building to build that also.
So with the symmetrical option on the right-hand side, the south end, so the two, first floor and the second floor facing this direction, facing west, they would not have any windows? Or would that be an additional
I don't think we know that yet.
They have the windows, they have the windows that open to the courtyard.
Well, they have windows.
You're talking about,
Sides, if not,
you're talking about
Right.
those.
That would be blocking the windows that are existing.
Oh, I see what you're saying, sorry. I was not tracking that.
We inside, I see what you're saying. Yeah.
So they wouldn't have enough windows?
Actually, it wouldn't be in the classroom.
And what I want to
I
do,
think they're not classrooms.
For the second floor?
Yeah, it's not one.
so we have all these so you can look at them at the same time, sort of.
Third floor, they're open. That second floor. Oh, right there was that.
So in this case.
It's that one right there.
Yeah, it's gonna be a little.
Yeah, so it's that one.
The life science won't be taking place.
Science teachers don't need to look out.
So they would have windows or?
Yes.
There would be
Small
one
windows?
classroom.
The one classroom would be the worst case would be the science room where you just have a little portion of exterior wall that could get a window on it, so.
And the first floor would be the art room or?
They have side windows.
It's part of the commons for the most part of the staff.
Oh, for that.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure we got windows in.
We have to get windows in every
Windows are
classroom.
great.
We have to.
Yeah.
We worked pretty hard to do that.
It's a requirement.
Especially in the art department. That'd be great to have natural light.
Tom, can you go back to the front perspective of the L-shaped option for the north wing?
Yeah.
Just from an aesthetic point, the symmetrical just makes the facade look much more like you meant to do it. This is a little bit more like, hey,
Yeah,
let's
like
build,
you meant to do it,
let's
yeah.
build something around the facade, whereas the symmetrical is like, oh no, we meant to build it this way, you know.
And conversely, Tor, I was seeing it the other way. But the symmetrical option to me looks like what we currently have, where we've packed these things on. So I mean, I don't dislike either one of them. I like both.
Sure,
Just,
sure.
This one to me opens it up a little bit more.
Exactly.
I think it also depends on how those additions look. You know, right
Right.
now they're just a blank
Exactly.
box.
They
You
look
know.
great.
They're not gonna be orange.
Right, you know, I mean, it doesn't help, right? There's just blank box with no windows.
Dan had a comment that he's been kind of patiently waiting for.
Yes, the last one you showed us still has the problem of deliveries on the south side, which on that main street is an issue.
Oh, with
I think the deliveries on the north side is gonna.
Yeah, the kitchen one on this one, I agree with them.
Yeah.
The kitchen one on this
Yeah.
one is in a much better
Because
place.
you've got the Lincoln traffic. is what you're-
Yeah. So our goal, and we haven't really started to develop it, is there's some room here between the kitchen and what is the building and the street. So we would want to try to create a nice space that you're not just stopping in the street to deliver anything. We need to design a good receiving area
Pull
there.
through.
Yeah, at least.
We would
But
get
I-
delivery traffic.
if you don't mind me saying, the pull-through is a great idea, and it's perfect for 90% of the trucks that come here. But you still have to get off that street. And 90% of the trucks that come here come from that direction, which means you'd be pulling across Capitol Avenue.
So coming from this direction, pulling in here.
Yeah, you'd be coming from my left to my right,
Okay.
because that's the way the trucks are coming.
Sure.
So any truck that would show up here to deliver food, deliver my stuff, would have to come off of Capitol Avenue, take a left into the delivery area, and then try and go back across to get back on Capitol. You see what I'm saying? I mean, somewhere along the line, you'd have to get across Capitol Avenue. And with the truck, most people can do it. I wouldn't be one of them.
What is it, just in the interest of time, because we do have another community meeting that starts at 7 o'clock for the neighbors to hear about the possibilities for First Avenue. And I do want to make sure that the people presenting get a chance to get a little something to eat between now and then, which is 25 minutes. What do you need from us as a team before the next meeting?
Well, last time we came with sort of 3 configurations. We trimmed it down to 2. It would be nice if there was some sort of consensus that said, hey, you know, we'd really like you to focus on 1. Tom, is that too direct?
That would be great.
Give a copy of the diagram. So maybe start with the 2 big, the north versus symmetrical, and then we have 3 symmetrical.
Yeah, so again, I think what I would say is if there are some functional issues, that shouldn't be that maybe shouldn't be a driver that would sway you to one or the other, because we've got some options. We can sort of resolve those sort of functional
We
things.
just really need to look at, do we want the north wing or symmetrical?
Yeah, and I think,
That's
I think that's, and with,
But do we want to just take out Mitch's idea, straw poll? I know I promised Jeff we wouldn't vote.
I was
don't
gonna
think
say,
either one
you're
of you-
talking to Jeff.
I know. I don't know if this.
That's right, I'll vote for Jeff.
Okay.
Yeah, we're hoping through that. We can text him.
A couple of things with the north wing, you definitely would have the commons sort of favoring the north side. You definitely would have the kitchen on the north side, which again, deliveries would be, as we're looking at now, would be intermingling with, we'd have to intermingle those patterns with bus traffic and that is a main entry. So I think those are kind of the big differences versus.
Like for me personally, I love the commons on the north wing. I mean, I think to me that is a comment. So that part I really like. Which one? I like the commons part of the north wing, and to me that speaks to what a commons is, and how that kitchen is configured and all of those things. Is there any way of taking that and putting that into? It does, but you don't get the volume. You lose the height. And I just think that's a really. I think that's a really important aspect that gives it a modern twist in this historic building. Is kind of where I'm coming from. That Tor's got a comment.
Just a real quick question. Is one fiscally more efficient than another, i.e. cheaper?
Not really.
Okay. 6 of one, half dozen of the other.
Right. And maintenance would be the same.
As long as they do that.
Is one easier to keep than the other? How about the energy?
I don't think so. It's got to be better someone is.
Is there an answer to Michelle's question about the symmetrical layout with the taller commons that retains both?
Yeah, the first thing I would look at is lowering that floor to get more volume.
Which could be cool.
Which could be cool.
Yeah, I mean that's
So you would walk down into the
sunken living room.
So you'd have steps going up and then steps going back down?
No, I think we would have, we would take this whole wing, you'd go down once, and you would be at that same level for that classroom.
You could also eliminate something on the second floor above the commons, a symmetrical wing, but you would have to find another place to put it. But perhaps it's, okay, so let's look at the top left board. If you move the classroom to the east a little bit, right there, you just add a second floor there. And then you have that, you just shift those classrooms over a little bit. Then you could have a 2-story space over there. You're basically adding square footage by having the 2-story space on the north wing option. I mean, you know, you're using that knuckle. There's no purpose besides a 2-story space in that knuckle area.
Yeah, but you don't build the floor. You don't build 2 ceilings. So.
Right, but there's the space. I mean, which is what you could do with the other one too.
But yeah, there's some options to look at.
Yeah, I think, I mean, to me, that's the only factor that would keep me from going with symmetrical and running with that, because
I think the symmetrical celebrates the original.
It does, absolutely.
I also think it's supposed to. They only make one drop a month. Having that whole front of the street, size drop off. And that's what you can really look at. I also like the idea of the library media mimicking the windows of the added addition. I think they have the best architectural opportunity for aesthetics here. And I think it'll support the traffic.
And I would think you could potentially move those 2 classrooms to the end of the wings, you know, kitty corner to the staircases, potentially to get that extra. Yeah, to make the ends of the wings look.
Well, but then you're adding 4 because you have 2 floors. Anyway, I mean, there's a variety of ways that you can maybe move the space around.
And Michelle, to be honest, I might want to make some effort to convince you that the space would be awesome without making the 2-story volume.
And I'm very open to that conversation. I really want to make sure that while we maintain the historical facade and celebrate that and the auditorium and all the beautiful aspects of that, that we also have something that says this was actually built in 2016 too. I mean, I think that there's a way to do that, I would think. And I've seen some of your guys' work that has like a corner piece or something that says, this is really modern.
The one thing that we need to explore is with the symmetrical option. I think, again, it's worth exploring. If these two wings are symmetrical, they can be more modern, and just because of the symmetry, they still celebrate that original facade, but they can be a more modern expression. Still complementary, but there's an opportunity to do something that's a little different.
I trust you guys. I just really think that
So can we do a straw poll here just between symmetrical and north wing here? Who would prefer the north wing? We have 2, 3. Somebody, could you jot this down? Okay, and well, the other one.
That's on video.
Okay, so just you know, stick your hand up if you're for the symmetrical, just so that you get that physical "I'm for something." Okay, so the rest of people. You don't have an opinion. Okay, so we have 1 abstention, 2 north, and
I think there were 3 north.
Oh, 3 north. Sorry, 3 north. So somebody's down. Because I came up with it. And okay, so what was that?
I say we got this math working.
Yeah, it's too late for math. Okay, so what do you want to do with this information, David?
So it's what the committee wants to do with the.
Okay, well, so we have 3 for the north. We have 1 abstention. We have Jeff, and I'm not. You know, where's Tor? Where do you go?
Or left. Maybe you say like this symmetrical.
Symmetrical. Okay, so we can text.
And I want to
Jeff.
state very clearly, I'm not opposed to the symmetrical at all.
Okay.
I just have a slight preference for the both, but I am entirely okay with this.
Okay. So we'll just do a little orange card here.
Yeah.
I always second that. So
Okay.
it seems like for going forward for next week, if we could run with the symmetrical, not take the north wing completely off the table until we actually hear from everybody on the design team, but the work for the next week would be done on the symmetrical.
Would we want to look at the kitchen being on the north side, that option, more than the kitchen on the south side?
I think on the north side, yes.
I think for PE spaces on the, you know, if you look at the south side of the building versus the north side of the building, the south side's much more desirable for hard surface PE spaces because of the solar orientation. The north side's shady and cold all the time, and windy.
Well, I think the traffic issue too. Image traffic issue too. The deliveries on the south side, I don't think are the best.
Would it make a difference if they did keep north? I can't remember what.
First Avenue.
First Avenue.
What was the question?
Would it make a difference if they did keep that one first, as far as where the kitchen is and the accessibility to the doors and that kind of thing?
I don't think we're talking about a true case.
Yeah, there still has to be a street, basically, and traffic through there. But I think what we need to do is get more information about the types of vehicles, trucks, deliveries, time schedules, those kinds of things. 'Cause
There isn't. That's just it. The big thing is there is no scheduled deliveries. Okay, the truck shows up, you unload it, and you go from there.
So one of the things about having it on the north side is that in the schemes that anywhere where the kitchen is on the north side, we also have the commons and bus traffic, bus drop-off. So it's just a lot more coordinating that has to happen between all of those vehicles. Plus, that the area outside the kitchen is not always the most pleasing environment. There's dumpsters and there's maybe potential yards. So we're probably looking at some sort of screening element there too. So it just adds a lot more to what's already going on.
Isn't the main entry off of the middle, the west middle historic
Well,
I want to make sure that we also honor our time too. We've got 15 minutes until our next meeting. I mean, we just have to be careful of that because I want to make sure that, although